Hello and welcome to My Model Railway. My Model Railway layout has been shown a few times on the channel, but I've been rather apprehensive to show it in its current stage. However, I thought it would be a good idea to walk you all through the progress I have made on my layout from day 1 to now. Keep in mind though, I am no expert when it comes to modelling, so do not treat this series as a how-to guide on how to build your own layout. But I hope this will be an informative video for any beginners who are thinking about taking the plunge into making their own layout. At first it does seem like quite a daunting prospect, but I can definitely assure you that building your own layout is one of the most rewarding and satisfying hobbies out there, and with some good planning, you can definitely make the layout of your dreams. Before we get into the creation of my own layout, I thought I would talk about what jump-started this whole process. Model trains have always been a part of my life from a very young age. Unfortunately, due to this being a rather expensive hobby, I fell out of love for it as I went into my teenage years. While I was at university, however, I began to watch model railway YouTubers in my spare time or while I was deep into coursework. These channels gave me inspiration and always made me think to myself, one day I will create a layout of my own to have. It wasn't until I returned home and saw someone local selling their father's model railway layout in a nearby town that I remembered my childhood dream of wanting my own model railway layout. The layout I bought was in quite a bit of disrepair. The track was all rusted and the boards were covered in a thick layer of dust after being in this person's attic for far too long. However, there was so much scenery and buildings included in this offer that I took the opportunity and bought the layout. Originally I was just planning to recreate this person's layout track plan with brand new track and move forward from there. However, I quickly found this original track plan did not allow for running of multiple trains, and the curves used at some points on the layout ran too closely to one another, which would have resulted in crashes. It was at this point I decided to expand on this tired and misshapen layout I had bought and strive to create my own track plan, while still retaining some of the scenery elements on this original layout, such as the farm area, the cricket pitch, and the old cottage. Now let's talk about size. Originally, I didn't have much room available, and I wasn't thinking about expanding the layout beyond the size of the original pre-owned one. However, a room in the house became free around this time, so it was decided that this would become the train room. I am currently working with a 5-foot by 7-foot custom board, which I purchased in sections online from a laser cutting company. The board rests upon a very strong custom wood structure, which was put together by our local decorator. They made it as strong as possible, so it would be able to support the weight of the board on top of it. If the time comes where the layout needs to be moved, it isn't fixed permanently in place and can easily be lifted up. The board currently sits neatly in the room against the back wall, but this can be pulled away from the wall to allow me to access the back half of the layout at any time. It just requires me crawling underneath and popping out the other side. I had so much inspiration over the years from attending different model railway exhibitions and watching different model railway YouTubers. This was definitely the exciting part. Going to an exhibition, it does feel a bit like an overwhelming experience seeing so many talented people, what they've been able to create, and all in different scales. It was at this point I realised I needed to sort of think about what I wanted to emulate in my own layout. It's amazing to see what people can create in such a small amount of space. I thought about all the different sites that I wanted to have on my layout, while also taking into consideration what buildings I already have from the existing second-hand layout, and what buildings and kits are readily available to buy. Metcalfe, Hornby, Bachmann, they all have different types of buildings available to buy, but I wanted to have a theme with my buildings, so it all sort of matches up and doesn't look a bit too misshapen. I already had a handmade colliery building which I had purchased at a model railway show years before, and I knew that I wanted to work this into the layout somehow. I also knew that I wanted at least 2 stations, with the potential of a train waiting at each station, allowing them to travel between them and stop there to collect passengers. A small town/village area in the middle of the layout, which would be somewhere for the trains to stop at. a viaduct, which would also allow for trains to be seen at different levels in the background, a tunnel, because I like the idea of the track disappearing underneath a hillside at some point on the layout, and at least 3 running loops so I would be able to run multiple trains at once. My layout isn't based on any location in real life, but as a big Great Western fan, most of what I looked at for inspiration were of that region. Next was to take to a piece of software to map out the tracks and plan out a list of pieces of the track that I would need to order. I am a graphic designer by trade, and I have a publishing software available to me. I was able to download a PDF on the Hornby website, which gave me a guide to all the different standard Hornby track pieces that are available, all to scale with one another as well. The reason I decided to go with standard Hornby track was because over the years I've accumulated so much track already from different train sets, and also it's fairly cheap to buy. If you're anything like me, then you're using basic analog DC. I'm yet to take the plunge into DCC because I feel that I am not ready, or smart enough really, to attempt it at this point in my life. So I decided to design the layout knowing in my mind that only certain sections of track would be able to have power from the controller at any one time. The center loop, the middle loop, and the outer loop. The middle and the inner loop do become escape lines for trains to wait as they pass one another. The point work shown at the front of the layout here was inspired by a book I bought from Pico called the Railway Modeler Book of 60 Plans for Small Locations. This was actually on page 5, as you can see here. I also added curved points which would connect the inner and the outer track, allowing for trains to switch tracks with ease. The layout plan was finished, and I had a list of my tracks that I needed, so it's off to Hattons I went to place my order. Rest in peace, Hattons. As tracks started arriving, it was at this point I began laying down the track on the original board of the second-hand layout which I had bought, but I quickly realised I would much rather this be on a bare baseboard rather than using second-hand layout boards which, no matter how much I cleaned them, were never completely clean. However, I did cut a section of this original board out to keep on the layout, so I would have a little bit of scenery at this point in the layout. This section would contain the cricket pitch, the farm, and the old cottage, which are the main areas from the original second-hand layout which were kept in my design. All my track was laid in place, and I made sure it fit with the necessary buildings which the track would come beside, like the station platform or the sheds. It was at this point I decided to slightly alter my plans. I had hoped to include a siding for diesel engines and a small shed, but I found that instead of this I would much prefer to have a goods shed instead, allowing for trains to deliver wagons here and also create some shunting operations. I tested the track an awful lot, ensuring that the engines were running smoothly with no cutting out, and I was pleased that everything was working well. I should also note that to make this layout possible, the inner loop uses Hornby's Radius 1 curves, which are extremely tight and not recommended to use with large tender engines, as their wheelbases would be too long for them. However, with the inner loop, I had only planned to be running my smaller engines on with local passenger services and small goods trains, so this was not a bother to me. I have yet to have an issue with any small loco running on the inner loop. I also decided around this time that I would fix 2 layers of foam bases to the board, which would allow for scenery, pins, anything to be easily stuck and pierced through the foam board bases. I used a foam adhesive to stick them all in place once I had cut them to the size they were required to be. I also cut out a section of the foam here for the section of the second-hand layout to slot in nicely here. Once I had done several more test runs, the next stage would need to be done before fixing the track in place once and for all, and it was a big project. So in order to reach the outer loop viaduct which I wanted to run along the back of the layout, I would need to find a way in order to raise the track to that height. I looked online and learned that the best option would be to buy woodland scenic risers Quite a few YouTubers have warned against using risers with locomotives, stating that they would make your locos stall and they would not be able to climb steep inclines, but I decided to go against the grain and just go for it, because I really wanted that viaduct. Risers are generally used in incline and declines on model railway layouts to create varying grades on your layout. Risers are made from a type of high-density foam material that can withstand lots of weight. Risers are easily flexed to form curves and work on foam bases. I drew an outline around the outer loop, so I knew where the risers would need to be and pinned them in place. Once this is all in place, I relayed the track now on top of the risers and tested a few locos which ran absolutely fine. Next I needed to assemble the viaduct which would run along the back of the layout. I bought this Metcalfe kit at Wally 2023 and measured it up so it fits snugly between the risers, which I cut to size. At this point the layout is finished from an operations standpoint. All the track is in place, everything is wired and the trains are running without issue. The next portion is all scenery and buildings, so let's move over to that section now. Originally, the station I wanted to include as my one and only station was my Hornby Scaledale model of Goathland Station, which I purchased before I'd even started my own layout, because I heard the building was being delisted in favour of the Hornby Hogsmeade version of the station. However, the more progress I have made on the layout, especially now seeing how close the building would be to the viaduct, I have considered removing the station and replacing it with perhaps a small halt instead. Let me know what you think in the comments. My main station has one platform but includes a siding platform for local passenger trains to pull into. The building at this station is an Oxford Structures Great Western Station building. This typical GWR station building is the kind of building I wanted to have on my station, as it is perfect for placing on the platform of any village or town. I was unable to find if this building has been based on any existing structure, however I do see it as more of a generic building which can be recognised as something from the GWR. Behind the station, the road continues over a short crossing which I haven't actually installed yet, and then arrives at what will be the station car park, and this also doubles up as a yard for the goods shed. The platforms here are actually from the lot of second-hand items which came with the second-hand layout. I was considering replacing these platforms, but they fit quite nicely between the tracks here, and even the curve of them fits alongside the curved point, and I kind of like them. I might touch them up at some point and make them a bit better looking, perhaps by including brick edges which are more consistent instead of the mismatched ones that are currently there. The retaining walls in the background are all card kits by Metcalfe, nice and cheap and easy to build. I picked these up at Wally. I have these running alongside the start of the incline to the tunnel, and then around the yard area to the other tunnel mouth. They match up nicely with the viaduct as well. Using some offcuts of polystyrene, I used a hot wire cutter to create the shape which fits over the tunnel area here. I think everything looks rather nice at the moment. It definitely looks very much like the standard GWR station, reminiscent of a quaint little junction station in Wales. This Great Western engine with its matching Hatton's Genesis coaches looks very in place here. Let's take a moment and watch the engines run around the layout. And that is where the layout is currently at. The next steps will be painting the foam boards, so the bright orange does not show through when it comes to adding grass and ballasting under the rails. I don't want that to show at all, really. Then it's on to fitting the track in place and starting to ballast the track. I want the yard to use a darker ballast so it looks more sooty and grimy. I also need to work on creating further hillsides behind the outer loop at the back, which will blend nicely in with the backdrop of the Welsh mountains, and begin the process of laying hills with plaster cloth. More of this will be covered in part 2, hopefully sooner rather than later, when I feel that enough progress has been made. I will be keeping you all up to date with progress via community posts, YouTube shorts, and my TikTok as well, so please subscribe and follow me on social media to keep up to date with my progress. Before I finish the video, I would just like to give a shout out to the following channels that inspired me to push forward creating my own layout. Mouldy Raspberry for his beautiful layout, which I watched progress throughout my later years in university and inspired me to one day want to make my own layout. That Model Railway guy for his scenery tip, which will become more useful as I go forward. And Unlucky Tuck, who is not a self-proclaimed expert when it comes to modelling. He has an amazing layout. Check all these channels out if you would like more inspiration when it comes to layout building. I hope this video was informative, and I hope it helps anyone who is thinking about making their own layout take the plunge. That's all from me, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you for watching.